Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here we are. It's another edition of Post-Gazette Live. I'm Paul Zeise here and of course, lots and lots and lots of bits to get to with you. First and foremost, as always, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's is the home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich, open on Sundays for all the games, open on Saturdays for all the college games. Obviously, you got conference championships this weekend. Get down to Archie's, and when you get there, tell them I sent you. Well, we can start here. Today, the Ravens announced, actually, that Deontay Johnson would be suspended for one game. And the reason that he's going to be suspended for one game is because apparently in their last game, he refused to go into the game. He basically, I guess they were playing the Eagles, obviously, and he was asked to go into the game, and he said no, he's not, mostly because he is unhappy with the way that he's either being used or how much they're throwing it to him or whatever. So, at the end of the day, Deontay Johnson is suspended, brings the question, and I think all the way into focus, and that is, did the Steelers make a good move when they traded him? Obviously, the Steelers, when they first traded him, there were a lot of people that were upset about it. I thought it was a bad decision. Not necessarily trading him, but because it didn't seem like they had a plan, and really still doesn't seem like they had a plan to replace him. Obviously, having guys like Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin playing better, it's helped soften the blow a little bit of the loss of Deontay Johnson. But clearly the Steelers got the better end of that deal when they traded for Donte Jackson from the Panthers, because Donte Jackson has been a productive player for the Steelers. Deontay Johnson is, he struggled when he was in Carolina, then he struggled with the Ravens, and now he's found himself on the bench. So for the Steelers' sake, it appears to me, at least, that they got the better end of the deal. And I think that's part of it is, Mike Tomlin didn't really – Deontay Johnson seems to be the kind of guy that even Mike Tomlin couldn't reach. And clearly what's going on, Baltimore is similar to Pittsburgh in the way that they do things, the way they go about their business. It is really very similar in the way that they are as an organization. So if you can't get along enough to get on the field with the Steelers and the Ravens, I would say that the problem is most likely with you. I don't think there's any question about that, actually, at this point. The problem is most likely with you. And so it feels to me like when they moved, they moved on from Deontay Johnson. He went to Carolina. You felt like he was going to help that team, and he really didn't. He just didn't become the kind of player that they needed him to be, and they found him expendable. So I think that, he had a reasonably good run here in some ways, but in other ways, he wasn't worth the headache that he clearly seems to bring. And I think that the Ravens have found that out, and maybe they have even a little bit of buyer's remorse. Although I will say that, Lamar Jackson said, hey, we want him here. He's a great receiver. We didn't get him for nothing. So, there's a reason we want him here. So it's one of those things where, his productivity has been down. They've been down a little bit. They've been down on him. The Ravens general manager said it was a tough decision, but hey, listen, when you are going to be a guy that we bring in here to be a part of an offense that's pretty good, we need you to actually do what they need, what we need you to do. So I understand where they're coming from. I look at the Steelers situation and I say, you know what, the Steelers actually got a really good deal in this by basically unloading him for a player who, let's face it, when they signed Diontae or when they traded for Donte Jackson, there was a lot of discussion about how he would fit in because he seemed to be a guy who was far more just sort of a fast corner than he was somebody that had a lot of success in coverage. Well, you know, he's got 5 interceptions for the Steelers. I don't know that he's been great, but I do think he's been good. And I think he's been steady, and I think he's been consistent. You could make an argument that Donte Jackson has been the most consistent player they've had in their secondary, and that includes Minkah Fitzpatrick because I think Minkah Fitzpatrick has been up. He's been down a little bit. He's had games where he hasn't played really, really well. I think Donte Jackson, for the most part, has played well, since he's been here. So to me, it's one of those things where, you know, the Steelers got the better end of the deal. Now, the criticism I had of the deal wasn't that they traded Deontay Johnson. It was, what are you replacing him with? Because it really didn't seem like they had a plan. And I'm not sure that they still have a plan. I think the plan was Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin, when they get a better quarterback around, when they get a guy like Russell Wilson thrown to them, will be far more usable and far better than they were without a good quarterback. So to me, I look at Calvin Austin. I think he's gotten better and better. He's starting to sort of scratch the surface a little bit to what people kind of thought he might be based on the way he has played at these training camps. And Van Jefferson is a professional receiver. I think he's better cast as like a 3 or a 4 than a 2, but he's made plays for them when they've needed him to. And, that's all you can ask. Again, it's amazing how much better these receivers are when they've got an elite quarterback thrown to them. That's what's pretty amazing to me. They are basically one of these teams that I look at and I say, when you have a good team, when you have the right elements, you can plug guys in that maybe didn't have a lot of success elsewhere, and they all of a sudden figure it out. And that's sort of what's happened with Donte Jackson. That's sort of what has happened with Van Jefferson. Being able to play with Russell Wilson has really, really been important for him and all the receivers, really, George Pickens included, because now they've got a really good quarterback throwing to them. And I think that's the thing about, those two guys need to continue to get better. I'm not saying they are where they need to be completely, but they need, have gotten better and better and better and better and better. And really, if you think about it, if they continue to get better, it only is going to make the Steelers that much more difficult to deal with. And I'm talking about their offense. I mean, I think if you look at their offense right now, take a big view, you look at it and you say, basically, hey, I mean, they run the ball well. Their offensive line's getting better. They've got a great quarterback. They're tough to deal with. And I think they can continue to be tough to deal with as long as Russell Wilson is healthy, which, there's no reason to believe he won't be healthy the rest of the year, barring a freak accident of some sort. So I really think that if you look at it from that standpoint and that perspective, there is no question in my mind that this offense is still just sort of scratching the surface of what it can be. And a big part of its evolution and it's a big part of, it getting better will be basically these two receivers they have that basically were the replacements for Deontay Johnson getting better. And the better they get, the better the offense is going to be. And I think that's really going to be important because it is now one of those things where I think that, it's just going to be interesting to see how the Steelers continue down the path, with this offense that they have that really, let's face it, could actually be very, very, very much a high-powered offense where they can score a lot of points. And they can score points on a lot of different teams. That's for sure. I do think that one of the interesting little side notes, I don't know, did you happen to catch the Hard Knocks last night with the Steelers? with the AFC North. It's so interesting to me that, you get a chance, like an insider's look. I mean, if you haven't seen Hard Knocks, it's like a insider's look, where they've got cameras and mics and all that other stuff. It's so interesting to me that Mike Tomlin, because of his performance on Hard Knocks, Mike Tomlin is getting all these accolades from people saying, oh, well, now you can really see what, why his guys play for him and what a great coach he is and why he's so beloved in his locker rooms and why he has so much success. And anybody that would want to move on from him, they need to watch this and see this because, boy, the way he talks to his players, his insight, the way that he encourages his players and all this other stuff, it shows that he's a great coach. Nobody's disputing that, any of that. And in fact, I don't know that anyone has ever disputed that. Mike Tomlin is the ultimate coach when it comes to really being able to encourage his players and be sort of a player's coach and be a guy that guys want to play for and, has a great rapport with his guys and a great chemistry. And that's a part of his success. But I'm going to tell you this much right now, okay? In the NFL, results matter. And if the Steelers don't win a playoff game this year, all of the criticism of Mike Tomlin will get louder, as it should, because that'll be 8 years in a row without winning a playoff game. And I'm glad, all of your players love you. I'm glad that you're great in the locker room. You've got a great rapport. You've got, all the other stuff that we hear about from this Hard Knocks episode. But here's what I'm going to tell you. You could say the same thing about Kevin Stefanski. You could say the same thing about Zach Taylor if you watch this Hard Knocks. They looked very relatable to their players. They looked very much like they were guys who were good players, coaches. They were encouraging. They had a great chemistry with their players. They seemed to, really be able to, communicate well with their players. It's all the same to me. All the same stuff that you talk about with Mike Tomlin. The only difference is, for some reason, we talk about it with Mike Tomlin as if it should trump the fact that they haven't won a playoff game in 7 years. I mean, to be honest, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, I mean, at the end of the day, you have what I would say 4 coaches in the division who are all really relatable to their players, really, players, coaches, have great chemistry, encourage their players, all that stuff. But guess what? Only one of them hasn't won a playoff game in 7 years. And it ain't Stefanski. It ain't Zach Taylor. It ain't John Harbaugh. Because they have all won at least one playoff game in the last 7 years. And that, I think, is something that cannot be understated, is that this year is great. It looks like the Steelers are back on the right track. It looks like the Steelers are a team that, is now all of a sudden legitimately a contender again. It looks like the Steelers will have an opportunity to win. But if they don't, then what are we talking about here? What are we talking about? I don't care if they go 14-3. If they go 14-3, get the number 1 seed, and then lose in their first game in the playoffs, I'm not sure that I get all that excited about, he has great rapport with his players. And it's clear, that, this is the reason these guys want to play for him and all that other good stuff. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Not even a little bit. It's about winning and winning in the playoffs. And I think sometimes we go way out of our way to try and, ignore that fact. But that is why there's criticism of Mike Tomlin. It's not that he, I think everybody will agree he's a really good guy in terms of being in the locker room. He's a really good guy in terms of being the face of the Steelers, a great ambassador for the city, for for the organization. Clearly players want to play for him. All that good stuff. That all applies for sure. But the big problem that you have there is it's got to translate into playoff success. And I'm sorry, getting to a Super Bowl 15 years ago, I don't know that really does it for me anymore. Getting to, winning a Super Bowl, 17 years ago or whatever it's been now? Not sure that does it for me either. I mean, I've often said this, and it's so true when it comes to Mike Tomlin. There are some people who want to treat Mike Tomlin as if the first 4 years of his career are the exception. Are the rule and not the exception. The bottom line is he got off to an unbelievable start as a head coach. And, I'm not going to bring the whole argument up again about, he won with somebody else's players and all that other stuff, but it's very clear he won, okay? He won a lot of games with a team that was built by somebody else. Did he add to it? Sure he did. Does he deserve credit? Absolutely he deserves credit. But at the end of the day, if you look at his first 4 years, right, he went, let's see, it would have been 24, 34. He went 43 and 21. Got to 2 Super Bowls. He was 5-2 in the playoffs. Since then, however, right, his playoff record is 3-8. 3-8. That's what his playoff record is. He's had, if you look at it this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times in the last 13 years, he hasn't won a playoff game. So I just want to say that I understand why there's this new narrative about him and, wow, this shows a different side of Mike Tomlin. Is there anybody that was really, really surprised by anything they saw on Hard Knocks in terms of Mike Tomlin interacting with his players? We've seen it how many times? We've watched it how many times? We've seen these NFL films type things how many times? Nothing has changed. Really, nothing has changed. So, yeah, okay, he's a great players coach and all that good stuff. So is Zach Taylor, if you watch this. So is Kevin Stefanski. In fact, if you just blindly took all their resumes out of the equation, you're a Martian or whatever that flew in, and the first interaction with AFC North football and the coaches was this Hard Knocks episode, you probably would say Kevin Stefanski is the guy that I'd want to play for. He's the guy that probably is the best coach of these guys. That's what you'd probably say. Now, obviously, the resume says something different. But to me, my point is, I don't understand how we got to a point where there's this new narrative now that, all the sins are forgiven because Mike Tomlin has really been somebody who his players can really his players can relate to him and all that other good stuff. Just doesn't make sense to me. By the way, the game is still on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street, 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. Home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. All of the games on the weekend, all of the games on Sundays. So you can go to Archie's, and when you get there, tell them Paul Zeise sent you. Archie's on Carson Street in the South Side. But again, this is not me ripping Mike Tomlin. This is not meant to me be like I'm attacking Mike Tomlin. I've said it many times. He's a good coach. For all of the reasons that I already laid out there, he's the right coach. He's the right coach when it comes to he's the right coach when it comes to the Steelers for now. But let's not lose our mind and lose track of the sight of the fact that he's the third coach, only the third, that has gone at least 5 seasons in a row with the same team and not won a playoff game. The other 2, the first one was Jim Mora Sr., who took over the Saints, who were the laughingstock of the NFL. They were the worst franchise in sports. And he took them over and made them respectable. So, yeah, he got a pass for, a few extra years that some guys wouldn't have because he took over a horrific team, not a team that had just won the Super Bowl 2 years earlier. The other one is Marvin Lewis, who also took over a horrific situation. And they were just happy that he was, getting to the playoffs from time to time, and they were respectable and winning the division from time to time. Yeah, he got a lot of years as well. The Steelers standard is different than that. There's a lot of people that want it both ways. You want it to be the Steelers have the high standards. The Steelers are the standard of this is the standard. The Steelers are the championship franchise out there and all that other good stuff. Okay, well, if they are, then there's expectations with that. And expectations are you're playing to win in the playoffs. So it's great that you get there most of the time. But again, 11 out of 13 years, the Steelers have not won a playoff game. Not one. That's not what the standard is. And I think Mike Tomlin himself would tell you that. So, I think this team is better. I think this team is good. I think this team has a chance. But I also think that if they don't win, then the seat under Mike Tomlin should be really warm. And I know there are some people that think that Super Bowl 17 years ago buys him a lifetime contract. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. That's really what it comes down to. You have to win in the playoffs. If you're the Steelers coach, you got to win in the playoffs, period. And I think that's what really people are talking about. Whenever they talk about, the people, Tomlin haters. There's no haters. There's no such thing as a Tomlin hater. You know what there is? A lot of people who are out there who really, really, really want to see the Steelers win in the playoffs again. Who really want to see the Steelers act like there's a higher standard than 10-8 or 10-7 or 9-8 and lose in the first round. Because, hey, as long as you keep knocking on the door, you're going to have an opportunity to get in. Well, it's been 7 years now. So do we expect them to get in next year? Do we expect them to get it right 5 years from now? I've often asked this of people who act like Mike Tomlin has a lifetime contract. I've often asked this. How many more years, if he does not win a playoff game, should he be the coach? My thing is, if he doesn't win it this year, if he doesn't win a playoff game this year, I would say next year is do or die time for him. But that's what I would tell you is going to be interesting. Is what if he does not win win a playoff game this year? I mean, if he doesn't, it's fair to question everything that he's doing. I did like the Hard Knocks episode. There were some neat things about it. I'm not trying to disparage it. But what I am trying to say is I just think that sometimes we want it both ways in this town. We want the Steelers to be, the franchise that's up here, the model franchise that everyone's looking at and wants to be. And then we don't want to hold them to that standard, especially when it comes to Mike Tomlin. And that's just, to me, I think is what's wrong. But it was a good episode. Don't get me wrong. I liked it. I thought it was good. And I think, NFL Films does it better than anybody. But again, and I'll tell you the other thing. The Steelers should win this division now. I think they got 5 games left. Is that what it is? They're 9-3, 5 games left with a game and a half in hand against the Ravens. That's a big lead in 5 games. You want to tell me, okay, well, the Ravens say they hold serve on their own home field. Okay, they move a game closer. I get all that. But But I think that when you have a game and a half lead on the Ravens, especially, if you go and beat the Browns this week, it'll be a 2-game lead. Then all of a sudden, 2-game lead with 5 to play, or 4, that would be 2-game lead with 4 to play. That would almost be a disaster if you somehow lose the division. So again, I think that, it's great that the Steelers are better than people thought. It's great that Russell Wilson is better than people thought. It's great that it looks like the Steelers are going to have an opportunity to do some things as they go into the playoffs, but they got to do them. And if they don't, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to sort of criticize. It's okay to say, you know what? They got to get better. Mike Tomlin's got to do a better job in the playoffs. You can't keep losing playoff games. You just can't. And people that want to get mad about it, it doesn't matter to me if you get mad about it. I deal in facts. I deal in reality. And while there's so much to like about Mike Tomlin, it's so easy to see why he's so likable. I get all that. But to me, it's actually 3-9 in his last 12 playoff games is what it is. Now that I'm looking at it right in front of me here. It's not good enough. It's not good enough at all. And again, we keep, playoff win is a playoff win. But one of them was against a really bad Matt Moore-led Dolphins team here. Another one of those games was in Cincinnati, if you remember. The Vontaze Burfict, Pac-Man Jones basically handed them the win. And then they beat Alex Smith and the Chiefs, which that was actually a pretty good win. Either way, those are their 3 playoff wins since 2010. It's a long time, man. It's a long, long time. So I think it's good that what they're doing, I think they're, it's good that they are, able to rally around Mike Tomlin. It's all really good stuff. But at the end of the day, that is irrelevant. What's relevant is when the playoffs begin, what is going to happen when the playoffs begin, and what is going to happen with the Steelers. That's what I would tell you is important. Like, I want to see a team win a playoff game. That's what I want to see. And I think that if they win a playoff game this year, it all goes away. But if they don't, then you start asking questions about it. Because, again, winning and losing is the bottom line in the NFL. And I would tell you this. I know that he took them to the Super Bowl one year, and they might have even gotten to the AFC title game a second time. But if Zach Taylor doesn't win next year, he's got to be on the hot seat as well. I don't care how relatable he is and how much his players love him. Doesn't matter. Got to win. And you know what? If the Ravens don't at least get to the conference championship game this year, I'd fire John Harbaugh. This isn't about hating on anybody. It's not about, criticizing unfairly and all the other garbage that you get whenever you have the audacity to criticize Mike Tomlin. None of that applies. I would have fired Stefanski already this year. It appears they're going to give him another year. I think he's obviously a very good communicator. He's smart. He understands the game. His players seem to like playing for him, yada, yada, yada. But if he doesn't win, then guess what? None of it matters. None of it. That's all I would tell you. And I look around the league, I think the greatest example of what I'm talking about is Andy Reid. He was in Philadelphia, didn't win a Super Bowl, got to the conference championship game a bunch of times, had a little bit of a downturn for a year, I think maybe even 2 or whatever it was, and they fired him basically. Not because he's not a good coach, but because it wasn't working and he wasn't producing results. That's the key here. Results. It's a result-oriented business. But what happened? The Eagles moved on from him, right? They've played in 2 Super Bowls. They won one of the Super Bowl. What's not to love? The Eagles got what they, were hoping for, which is, they had some success and actually went and finally got to a point where they won a Super Bowl. And Andy Reid, found a job in 10 seconds or whatever this stuff is that people talk about Mike Tomlin all the time. Well, if the Steelers moved on from him, he'd have a job in 5 seconds. Okay, who cares? Who cares? It's just like the whole thing with trades. I don't care what a guy turns into when you trade him. What is the guy that you brought here? How good is he? And it would be the same thing with the Steelers. Mike Tomlin, say he got fired, right? Say they moved on from Mike Tomlin. And the very next year they went out and won a Super Bowl. Would anybody care that they didn't have Mike Tomlin anymore? They wouldn't. They wouldn't. And that, to me, is the issue. So hopefully Mike Tomlin does a great job. And, they win a playoff game and he continues to move the franchise forward and all the other good stuff that we talk about. But, pardon me, excuse me, if I don't necessarily enjoy or sharing all this joy about what Mike Tomlin did on Hard Knocks and how that, changes my views on him. I thought he was a great coach before. I still think he's a really good coach. But it's getting to a point where he now needs to start winning playoff games again. Period. Or else I'm not sure what we're really talking about. Moving to the other side of the facility in the South Side, you've got Pat Narduzzi, who this weekend called his, after they just lost to Boston College, it was their 5th loss in a row. They're 7-5, called this season a success. From the definition of success, from the most technical definition of success, yeah, it was a success. Because they had 3 wins last year, they got 7 this year. But looking how it all played out, where you were 7-0 and then you went to 7-5, I mean, it's a disaster. If they lose to their bowl game, I mean, they're going to be 7-6. If I'm not mistaken, this is Pat Narduzzi's 10th year. And in 8 of those 10 years, he's had 5 losses or more. Similar to Mike Tomlin. Listen, it's similar to Mike Tomlin. He's done some good things that you can be excited about. But a championship a few years ago isn't enough to give him this lifetime pass. And at some point, all of the goodwill he has built, the fact that his players love him and he's, got a great program and his stability, and it's stability like Pitt's never seen and all the other good stuff. You can't lose 5 games every year. You just can't. That's the definition of mediocrity. And while I don't think Pitt is Alabama or, Notre Dame or one of these other really elite schools that has, unlimited resources and branding and all the other stuff, Pitt should be better than they've been. I mean, they shouldn't lose 5 games every single year. You want to tell me in a 5 or 6 year period they lose 5 games maybe twice? Okay. I'll live with that. But if you ask me, do I think Pat Narduzzi has done a great job this year? I don't think so. I know that there were, again, 3 wins last year, 7 this year. So you can say, well, they got better, they increased. They won more games than last year. But if you ask me, I just don't think it's all that relevant, to be honest. I don't. But nevertheless, should be a really big weekend, an important weekend for the Steelers. Tomorrow and Friday, we're going to break down the Browns game. And I don't know if you happen to see Jameis Winston. You got to see vintage Jameis Winston on Monday night, where he threw for 4 touchdowns and like 498 yards. But he also threw 2 pick sixes and almost threw a 3rd pick six. So, as I said the last time when they played the Browns, Jameis Winston's going to put a couple of them up for grabs. And if you come down with them, that's probably how you beat the Browns. And so for the Steelers, that's what it's going to come down to. Can they get underneath a couple of Jameis Winston's passes, and can they make sure that they don't let him go crazy for 497 yards without turning it over? Because that's the key. That's why the Browns lost the other night, is because Jameis Winston, put the ball in harm's way, which he tends to do. All right, that's it for us tonight. We will talk again tomorrow. Until then, enjoy your day.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.